Well, 'cause some idiot named Jason Monroe said something about then. I heard JJ Redick said something about me. JJ, you better calm down, because when you come for the king, you better not miss.
Did he name you specifically, or was he just talking about folks on TV?
He said something about we're the reason people ain't watching this crappy product we got. That's JJ. Yeah, us, like we out there jacking up 103 night. You just a dead man walking. They got rid of Frank Vogel, who did a good job. They got rid of Darvingham, who did a good job. If you came out there thinking you were going to change things with that same ugly girl you went on the date with.
That was interesting. Thank you very much. And your rebuttal.
Well, we're waiting.
Charles Barkley, a media personality and Hall of Famer, has been a vocal voice in the NBA for nearly 40 years have passed, and from his early 2000s days at TNT to the present, he has voiced his opinions loudly during every season. Many basketball fans adore Charles because they think he is always correct. No one can be, but Charles has his beliefs and opinions that he firmly believes in.
It was a 2-on-1. Oh, and the dude could have got a layup on the Knicks. And he went out to the three-point line. It was a 2-on-1.
Knocked away. Kane has got it. Hart's with him. Bridges for three.
That's terrible.
Charles is obviously not a big fan of three-pointers being taken 40 here, 50 there, and some teams combined for upwards of 90 points per game. I mean, the average three-point shot is almost 38 points per game back in 2016, when Steph Curry's area teams were playing. That's how far we've come in just over 10 years with a three-point shot, and of course Charles is right there expressing his thoughts on that. Charles Barkley dislikes the play style of this era and the attitude of many players, but being critical and abrasive these days makes a lot of people disapprove of it. One of those people is JJ Redick, the biggest douche in the NBA, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this already. JJ also kind of blames Charles for the decline in popularity and interest in the EN.
If I'm a casual fan and you tell me every time I turn on the television that the product sucks, well, I'm not going to watch the product. And that's really what has happened over the last 10 to 15 years.
It's very convenient, but it's also cowardly and just kind of slimy that JJ was crying and accusing Charles Barkley of being the cause of the NBA's problems and using him as a scapegoat. As for Charles, even though I love him, I'm not taking his or anyone's word for it as gospel. If he says, "This game stinks, this game was awful," I'll watch the game for myself and decide for myself that what Charles says, Shaq Kenny says, it's not gospel, the holy truth. We have to believe blindly what people like Redick don't want to admit, that Charles Barkley's opinions are resonating with a lot of NBA fans, especially older fans who have witnessed multiple eras. The funny thing is that at first, there was no problem. It's all sunshine and rainbows, but what are those fans doing? They are blaming Charles Barkley, which is obviously a big-time deflection, using him as the scapegoat. Barkley at TNT has been Charles Barkley since day one. He's been critical, brash, and outspoken about players and teams he despises, and he plays styles he despises. For someone like JJ, even in his podcast days, he will never point the finger at the modern NBA players, coaches, and those players on the court who aren't even remotely accountable for the NBA's decline.
We can't have a guy making $95 million saying, "I can't play basketball 4 days a week." You can't ask fans to pay that money for a guy making $95 million won't play back-to-back games. If anybody thinks that's a good idea, they're crazy.
Okay, but how do you fix
Well, man.
load management?
You play basketball.
So, Charles laid it out pretty simply. Load management is a complete disaster for the NBA and its fans. Of course, last season, after Charles complained, Adams made it mandatory to play 65 games in order to qualify for rewards or all NBA teams. And lo and behold, many players who had been sitting out, quote-unquote, due to injuries suddenly started playing 65 to 70 games with ease. Thus, Charles Barkley's criticism of Redick, quote-unquote, had a positive effect on the NBA and his supporters. Looking back at JJ, Charles' response to Redick was brilliantly on point, and he said what needed to be said.
I JJ Redick said something about me. JJ, you better calm down, because when you come for the king, you better not miss.
Did he name you specifically, or was he just talking about folks on TV?
He said something about we're the reason people ain't watching this crappy product we got. That's JJ. Yeah, us, like we out there jacking up 103s a night. JJ, I don't know Jason Monroe. I don't know who that is, but JJ, if you come for the king, you better not miss. You just a dead man walking. They got rid of Frank Vogel, who did a good job. They got rid of Darvingham, who did a good job. But you came out there thinking you were going to change things with that same ugly girl you went on the date with.
Something about Charles Barkley, and I'm like, huh? But Greg and Bo showed me. I didn't make it all the way through the clip. I got to be honest with you. My resting heart rate is probably 64. I watched the clip. It was 64. Literally don't.
Hey young man, you got knocked out for someone like Rek, who turns every press conference into a mini podcast. His blank stare and lack of response really say it all because of Corey's. You're a terrible liar, JJ Redick. He's right there, the basketball savant genius who's just light years ahead of everyone. He's just dumbfounded, speechless, and without words because of course Charles gave him a Mike Tyson right hook to the face of uncut truth. Charles stated that everyone is aware that the reason this man from Los Angeles is coaching the NBA is because LeBron James was a former NBA player, ESPN analyst, podcaster, and coach. You have no coaching experience and were chosen off the street to be LeBron's pinata in elementary school, high school, middle school, college, or even high school. That's the truth, and speaking of the truth, LeBron James, JJ Redick's boss, had nearly the same opinion about the modern NBA as Charles Barkley.
It's a bigger conversation. It's not just the All-Star game. It's our game in general. Our game is a lot of fucking threes being shot.
That's exactly what it sounded like. Charles James or LeBron Barkley were both saying the same thing on TNT. Charles is more vocal and says it more frequently, of course. But even LeBron James, an active player, can see that the three-point shot isn't the most entertaining thing when it's repeated endlessly. You can look at different eras of basketball, from the 1950s to the present, and appreciate different things about them while also criticizing the things those eras lacked or their skills. As for the modern NBA, they're not above slander or criticism from fans, the media, or current players. And when you look at someone like Redick again, this guy is a complete jerk. Extreme hypocrisy. JJ Redick would disparage any era that came before his own because, to be honest, he thinks those eras are inferior.
Different kind
Not once.
Not
fair.
Once. That's fair. You also had 29 assists in an NBA game.
Oh, well, he was being guarded by plumbers and firemen.
This game should be celebrated.
When fans of today criticize your era, the region you're playing in, the area you're coaching in, and again looking at a good impact, you can't get your pants into it for long if you're someone like JJ who throws stones and has these hot opinions about past eras. Barkley's criticism of lazy superstars and their poor management has benefited the NBA and NBA coverage overall. Even though Charles portrays his coverage as, quote-unquote, negative, when he calls out players like Ben Simmons and Zion Williamson, who earn millions upon millions of dollars for their endorsements but simply don't play basketball, it benefits the NBA overall. There is nothing wrong with the modern NBA for these particular fans. Everything is great, the threes are terrific, the talents are incredible, and what people like about JAJ1 is just blissful ignorance about the game. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently now. One last thing I do want to touch on a hammer home when Charles Barkley has these takes, these quote-unquote negative takes. If they were just outlandish, not rooting reality fans would brush him off, ignore him, and not really pay attention to him. But the thing is, Charles Barkley, his takes, they resonate and make sense to a lot of NBA fans, whether it be calling out superstar players underperforming, low management, or UEBSA on three is being taken on a given night in a way Charles Barkley kind of a megaphone or a medium. A lot of NBA fans aren't satisfied with a modern NBA game. If you ask a lot of fans who watch numerous eras from the 70s, the 80s till now, a lot of those fans agree with Charles and love his takes. Again, is Charles always right? No, nobody is, but what he says resonates and makes sense to the vast majority of fans. I begin to agree with you. The biggest mistake JJ could make, Adam Silver could make, is burning those fans off. As delusional being old heads or nostalgic stuck in their ways if you ignore an entire generation of fans who watched the 80s, 90s and 2000s but don't like today's game. You're going to lose their kids, and future eras of WB basketball fans. So that right there is the end of the video, and I'll say one last thing. Being quote-unquote negative or critical, it's not inherently a bad thing. What Barkley is doing right now in the short term can be viewed as hating or being overly critical, but in the long run, 10-15 years from now, what Barkley's doing in the moment we revered and remembered as a great service to NBA fans. As of course, looking at today's era, guys like Durant, LeBron of course, and Adam Silver more and more often coming out of the woodwork saying today's game has a problem that must be acknowledged. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Out next time.